We will begin this afternoon, as usual, with the refuge and bodhicitta prayer. O sangye chodan tsoge chonam la chancho bardo dani chabsum che dage jinso kibe sunam je Drola penjur sanje drobar sho sangye chudan soge chonam la chancho bardo dane chabsum che dage jinso gibe sunam je drola penjur Sanje drobar sho sangye cheda soge chonam la chancho pardo dane chabsum che dage jinso gibe sunam je drola penjir sanje drobar sho Samje tamje dewa tan dewe jutan drawal julche donga tan donga ji chutan drawal juji donga mebe dewa tamba tam min drawal juji Yedin chadani tan drawal Tanyon Shembola Nebrajolche. In the Dharma Expanse Palace, Avakanishta is the essence of all Buddhas of the three times, who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Guru. Please bless me and all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. Bless us that the Dharma become the path. Bless us that the path dispel confusion. Bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. And now think to yourselves that we must bring all sentient beings who have all been our mothers in past lives. We must bring all of them to the state of completely perfect Buddhahood. And in order to do that, we must achieve Buddhahood ourselves. We must engage in listening, contemplating, and meditating. So think to yourself that you are listening this afternoon for that reason. Excuse me. And now, the Dharma that we are listening to is the Treasury, Vasubandhu's Treasury of Abhidharma, as described or as explained in the Ninth Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje's commentary, Youthful Play. Of the 8 chapters of the Treasury and of its commentary, we are in the 3rd, the teachings on the world. The teachings on the world has 2 major sections: the world of sentient beings and the outer world. And so we're still discussing the first, the world of sentient beings. Within the world of sentient beings, there is first a description of the different types of sentient beings. And then, so that's the classifications of wanderers who are born. Then the second section is the nature of interdependence, the manner of birth. The third is the conditions for abiding after birth. Fourth is the minds of staying and dying, and the fifth is categorizing beings into 3 groups. And so among these 2, we are talking about the second, which is the nature of interdependence, which is the manner of birth. And so this also has 3 topics: the manner of the aggregates that or the manner of the aggregates alone link rebirth. In other words, saying that there's not anything else other than the 5 aggregates, no soul or so forth. The beginningless continuum of the aggregates. They're beginningless because it's cause and effect, and when you have a result, it must be preceded by its cause. That cause is also the result of something else, which had to have come before it, and so forth, back ad infinitum without any beginning. And then the third is understanding the nature of interdependence. And so in the nature of interdependence, there's explaining their individual natures, which It's not explaining it in detail, explaining the three periods that arise, teaching that how they're completed in 3 lifetimes, grouping them into afflictions, karma, and bases, and dispelling other deaths. I'm getting my topics mixed up. So we're still talking about how they are completed in 3 lifetimes. And in this, we have to talk about the individual natures, the 3 periods that arise, teaching that they're periodic, and so forth. And so here we have come to a section. We have been through the 12 links in the 3 periods yesterday and talking about how some are karma, some are afflictions, some are bases. And so I just want to go over this a little bit and bring in another point that's not directly talked about in the Treasury of Abhidharma, but it's an important point that comes up that you will see in other texts that you study, and it's also just an important point to know. So let's just, in doing this, let's kind of review these 12 links of interdependence. The first link of interdependence is what? Ignorance. So ignorance. So those of you who are watching at home, even if the studio audience is supplying the world, you can talk to your computer. It's okay to talk to your computer. Mingyur Rinpoche has been giving teachings, and he's doing it even simpler than I am. He's just sitting with the computer in his simchung, in his suite, and it doesn't look like anyone else is there, and he's still having people raise their hands. And he laughs exactly the same as whenever he asks people to raise their hands in a teaching, he laughs. And when he asks people to raise their hands and he's looking at a computer and can't see anything, he laughs. It's the same. So you can reply, you can speak to your computer as long as no one's going to think you're crazy for doing this. So the first link is what? It's ignorance. Okay, and then when there is ignorance, there is formation, because ignorance arises, formation arises. When there is formation, then there is consciousness, right? Consciousness. So when there is formation, there is consciousness. When formation arises, consciousness arises, right? And then when there is consciousness, there is name and form. When consciousness arises, then name and form arises. When there is name and form, there is six sense bases. The 6 ayatanas in Sanskrit, Kyeche wrote in Tibetan. Actually, I should say Shat ayatan in Sanskrit. Yes, the 6 ayatanas. So the 6 ayatanas are the 6 sense bases. So when there is consciousness, there are the 6. Then there are the 6 sense bases. When consciousness arises, the 6 sense bases arise. When there are the 6 sense bases, then what is there? Contact. When the 6 sense bases arise, then contact arises, right? When there is contact, then there is feeling. So when feeling arises, then when contact arises, then feeling arises. Then when there is feeling, there is what? Craving. Craving first, right? So when feeling arises, then craving arises. When there is craving, then there is grasping. So when craving arises, then grasping arises, right? So when you have grasping, then there is becoming. So when grasping arises, then becoming arises. When there is becoming, then there is birth. And so when becoming arises, then birth arises. When there is birth, then there is aging and death. So when birth arises, then aging and death arise. And so in this manner, there is the entire mass of suffering and samsara. There is the suffering, there is the sorrow, the lamentation, the unhappiness, the fighting, and all of the suffering of samsara. Okay? So this is how it all occurs. So we've got we've got some that are in when we're talking about it in three periods, we're talking about the period of what? The period of previous life, this life, and the next life. And so what is in the previous lifetime? Ignorance and formation. And then in this lifetime, we've got a whole bunch. Basically everything from contact up until which one? Becoming, contact to becoming. So that's 8 branches, 8 links. And then in the last lifetime, you have birth and aging and death. So that's 3, right? 2, right? Because aging and death, you only count as 1. 3 words, 2 links, okay? So basically, in the previous lifetime, you have ignorance, which is what? Is it affliction, karma, or a base? Affliction. And then you have, what comes after that is, formation is what? Karma, okay. So you've got the ignorance causes the affliction. Now when we talk about the ignorance, there's something that isn't very clear in this translation, and I kind of made a little pull at my mind to think, what does this mean? But I just sort of ignored it. And then I was asked about it, so I can't really ignore it. When you talk about ignorance, in this it says the ignorance at the time that you're performing afflicted contact. Actually, it's not quite that. It's really, in the commentary it says, this is back on page 235, it says the 5 aggregates during the afflicted contact. It actually means the 5 aggregates when you are enjoying or using or experiencing the afflictions. Okay, so that's what it is, the 5 aggregates when there are afflictions, essentially. Now, I haven't decided exactly how to retranslate this line. That's, when I revise the translation. But so that's what it is. So it's the 5 aggregates at that time, and then formation is the karma. Now, then in the middle lifetime, we have everything from consciousness up to becoming, right? And so we have the first 5 are what? Bases. So their results, they're called bases because they are the results, the karma and affliction in the previous lifetime, and they're also the basis for karma and affliction in this lifetime. Affliction and karma, I should say. So then we have we've got grasping, craving, grasping, and becoming, right? And so what is the difference between craving and grasping? What is craving? Craving is like this desire. I want that. Either I want that or I don't want that. There are actually, in other texts, they talk about 3 different types of craving. There is the craving of desire, the craving for destruction, and the craving of existence. The craving of existence is the craving that you have when you have the dhyana meditations or the formless meditations. So that's kind of rare in practice for us because we don't do those meditations. But what we think is the craving of desire is, I want something. Craving of destruction is, I want to get rid of something. I don't like it, right? So you've got those. So craving isn't necessarily gimme, gimme, gimme. Craving is either. And so then once you have that craving, then that motivates grasping. And so grasping is that really strong manifest emotion, which can be technically, which I called in this translation entangler, which is a word that it's the affliction that gets you entangled in action. So that's what we mean by grasping. And then that motivates becoming. And what is becoming? Karma. Right? So we've got 2 afflictions and 1 karma. And then in the last time we have birth and aging and death and sorrow and lamentation and unhappiness and fighting. Right? So we've got those 2 links. Right? So those are they karma, affliction, or bases? Bases, okay. So that's how it goes. And so this is what we call looking at the 12 links of interdependence, or the progression of the 12 links of interdependence. Affliction leads to formation, formation leads to consciousness, consciousness leads to name and form, and so forth, each one leading to the next. So that's Here, in terms of the teachings on the world, this is teaching us how sentient beings come to be, why we're here, not sort of an extent, but how we got to here. Often when we answer the question why, we can't answer the question why, and all we can say is how. How did we get to be where we are? What are we while we are here? Where are we going next? This is what is taught by the progression of the 12 links of interdependence. But there's another way of talking about the 12 links of interdependence, which is to talk about them in terms of the cessation. Because when ignorance ceases, then formation ceases. So ignorance doesn't arise, so formation doesn't arise. When there is no formation, then there can be no consciousness, right? So when formation doesn't arise, consciousness doesn't arise. When there is no consciousness, there's no name and form. When there's no name and form, there is no six sense bases. When there are no six sense bases, however you say this, when there are no six sense bases, then there is no contact. When there is no contact, there's no feeling. So feeling stops. So each of these stops. It's the order of the cessation, how they are blocked or how they are stopped. And so when there are no six sense bases, there's no contact, no feeling. Feeling stops. There is no feeling, so there is no craving. Craving stops. There is no craving, so there is no grasping. So grasping stops. There is no grasping, so there is no becoming. Grasping stops. Because there is no becoming, no karma in this lifetime, then there is no birth. And when there is no birth, there is no death. For there is only one cause of death, and that is birth. Birth is the only thing that you need for there to be death. Any time that there is birth, there is death. Anything else is a condition of death and not a cause. The real cause of death is birth. So when you stop death, when you stop birth, then you stop aging and death and all of the other sufferings of samsara. So that's the order of cessation. So you can look at the 12 links of interdependence in both of these ways. Okay? So that's the main point. There was something else that I thought to say that is now slipping. Oh, that's right. This is what it is. And so in this way, it all comes out of the ignorance, right? The first of the links of interdependence is ignorance. And so this is why we sometimes see the phrase, the ignorance that is the root of existence. That means the ignorance that is the first link of interdependence. So you'll see when you're reading texts, you'll hear people talk about the ignorance that is the root of existence. For example, there's the story of Khenpo Dorje, who went to see a Kadampa master and asked him, why are we suffering? And I'm going to get some of the specifics of this wrong, but some of the specifics I'm going to get right. He went to a Kadampa master whose name I don't remember, and he said, why do we have suffering of samsara? And the Kadampa master said, it's because we have not abandoned the ignorance that is the root of existence. And so that, when the Kadampa master is giving that answer, this is the ignorance, this link of interdependence. That is what he meant. Then Khenpo Dorje, and I might as well tell the rest of the story, which has nothing to do with anything else I'm saying today. Then Khenpo Dorje went to I think it was a Sakya master, and said, why do we have ignorance? Why do we have the suffering of samsara? And the master said, it is because the different winds are still have not moved from the lalana and rasana into the central channel. And lala rasa, I don't know what that means. I don't think I get these teachings. And then Dorje Gyaltsen went to Gampopa, and I said, why do we have the suffering of samsara? And Gampopa said, it's because you haven't recognized your ordinary mind. And Dorje Gyaltsen said, "Oh, that's it." And then he stayed. And he later became known as Patmo Drukpa and was the progenitor of the 8 younger Kagyu lineages, including the Jikung and the, I'm going to get these wrong, Jikung and Taklung and Yelp and Marsang and so forth, the 8. And also eventually the Drukpa Kagyu. So, at any rate, but that was a real digression. So now where we have got to in the commentary itself with that long thing. So the important thing about that digression, there are 3 important points. There is just, first of all, reviewing the 12 links, the progression of the 12 links. Then there is also introducing the cessation of the 12 links. Stop one, and then all the subsequent ones stop. And where do you stop it? You stop it with ignorance. Some people say you can stop it with craving. In the Theravada tradition, I say that you stop with craving. We usually in our tradition talk more about stopping it with ignorance. I think you can get it at both points, actually, because if you stop craving, then you stop karma as well, right? So you can probably get it at both points. But of course you can get it at both points. The Theravada tradition is a good tradition. There's no point in saying that you can't. You can definitely get it at both points. We focus on the ignorance. Okay. So that's the cessation, and then there's this is the reason why ignorance is called, why we talk about the ignorance that is the root of existence, because it's the first of these 12 links. So now getting into today's, we have come to the section now where we talk about the essence of each of the links. And this has 2 topics, actually explaining 4 links, and then the second is teaching that the other links are known for elsewhere. So it's even that says in the topic, teaching the essence, and this is on page 240, by the way. I should always tell you which page. We're on page 240 of the book. So actually explaining 4 links. And this has 4 topics: an explanation of ignorance, an explanation of name, half of a link. Is it explaining 3.5 links? An explanation of contact, an explanation of feeling. These are the 4 or 3.5. It's easier just to say 4. An explanation of ignorance. This is 2 topics, identifying its essence and dispelling wrong conceptions. So we have to figure out what ignorance is. This is a point. So we have to know, what is ignorance? Is it a thing in itself? Is it like, what is it? Because you might think, well, ignorance is not knowing, so it's just basically the lack of knowing. That's what you might think. Or you might think that, no, it's something other than the lack of prajna, the lack of intelligence. So you use a question, is it something other than a lack of prajna or a really defective prajna? Or is it the same? So here the answer is another dharma, an other dharma opposite to knowing. Ignorance is like untruth, unfriendly, etc. And this actually, I'm looking at it, this second line needs to be changed a little bit. It should be like, ignorance is like untruths, plural, non-friends, and such. Non-friends. It shouldn't be unfriendly, it should be non-friends, people who are not your friends. So here, the meaning of ignorance. Ignorance is an other dharma that is an unclear mental factor. Unclear, it's like you can't see it clearly. Either it's because it's not very clear, or it's because there's just no clarity at all. And what we're talking about being unclear in relation to is seeing the truth, the nature of phenomena, the nature of karmic cause and result. It's just like not being able to see it. It's like you just can't distinguish them because you have ignorance. So that's what we mean. So it is an other dharma. So it is a different thing. It is, in particular, what type of dharma is it, or what type of phenomena is it? Is it a form, consciousness, mental factor, non-concurrent formation, or a non-composite phenomena? Which type of these is it? Mental factor, right? Okay, so it's a mental factor. So, and it is the opposite of to correct knowing of truth, karma, and result, the jewels, and so forth. So when you have no idea what the truth is, even though you probably think you do know what the truth is, we always do. When you don't know about karma and result, or you don't know about the jewels, meaning the 3 jewels, or you misunderstand them, then that is ignorance. So it's the opposite to it. So it's not an absence of, it's in the opposite of it. This is an important distinction. As non-things and matter are also the absence of knowledge or something that is not knowledge, ignorance is not merely either of those two. So it's not just the absence of, it's not just complete lack of knowledge. And it's not just any old thing like a jug. Right? It's not like that. It's actually, in particular, it's exactly what is well, to just read the example, it's given here on the third line from the bottom of page 240. For example, it is like untruth, or it is like untruth, I should say in the category, like untruth, or like untruths, which are understood as lies. Non-friends, right? So you can have friends. There are people who are your friends, and then there are non-friends, right? People who are not your friends. Then there are people you don't care about, but your non-friends are your enemies. And then you have your friends, and then there are people you don't care about. Friends and non-friends, unfriends. Maybe it doesn't work as well in English as it did in Sanskrit and Tibetan. But basically you've got non-friends, people who are the opposite of friends, like your enemies. Maybe that's why I said unfriendly when I translated it. Because when you say unfriendly, so there are friendly people and there are unfriendly people, and then there are people who are just otherwise. So maybe I should leave this line as I had it originally. Okay. And non-dharma as non-virtue, and non-dharma as non-virtue. So like when you say that something is non-dharma, then that means you're talking, like when you're talking about killing, that's non-dharma, it's non-virtuous, for example. But it's not as meaning as the incorrect meaning, wrong action is unmindful action, and so forth. So basically what we're saying is, it's like a different thing. You've got virtue, and you've got non-dharma, or undharma. You've got friendly people, and you've got unfriendly people, and they're kind of like opposites. You've got truths and untruths, and then you have half-truths, and you have fake truth, etc. So this is what he's saying, basically giving analogies for showing that it's a different phenomena. So well then, from what do we know that ignorance is not merely an absence of knowing? So how do we know this? We've given the analogies, but how do we know this? Well, there's a reason why we say it. It says in a sutra, through the condition of ignorance, formation arises. So ignorance is functioning as a cause. Because it's functioning as a cause, it has to be a thing. For example, there is no jug on my table. No, well, okay, there's a vase on my table, there's no jug. Right? So there's no jug on the table. That absence of a jug on the table cannot act as the cause of anything. It can't do anything because there's nothing there to do anything. Whereas ignorance is different. Ignorance acts as a cause for us to do stupid things. It functions as a cause. People are ignorant, and as a result of being ignorant, they do stupid things. Right? You can see this all the time, and I'm not going to give examples, because you can think of examples for yourself. It is also logically proven because the eye and so forth, which are not knowing, are not the condition for formations, and rabbit's horns and such, which are the non-existence of awareness, also do not function as the causes for formations. So for merely the absence of knowing, then the I is an absence of knowing. It has no knowing, right? So it would also work as the cause of formations, but it doesn't. Or a rabbit horn. Rabbits do not have horns. There are no rabbit horns. If you see a rabbit-like animal with horns, it is not a rabbit, it is a fabulous jackalope. It is not a rabbit. So rabbits do not have horns, and therefore, those rabbit horns, therefore, cannot do anything. So they can't function as a cause of formation. So that's the main reason, because it works as a cause. Now there are different ideas about this, and so wrong conceptions about ignorance. And so in order to address a few of them, there are 2 points: dispelling wrong conceptions. And the first of the wrong confections, wrong conceptions. This has 2 points. The first is refuting that ignorance is a mere absence because it is a name for an affliction. So it is identified in the sutras, in many sutras, as a type of affliction. Because of fetter and such words, there are, as is taught in the 5th chapter that we will not get to this year. So it's taught in the 5th chapter, there are many names for the afflictions. There are the kernels, the fetters, the bonds, the entanglers, the floods, the yokes. There are all these different names for the afflictions, each of which talks about kind of a different way that the afflictions act. So here, fetter is one of those names. It talks about how it is. But the main point is that when the Buddha taught about the fetters, he mentioned ignorance. When he taught about the bonds, he mentioned ignorance. When he talked about all of these other classes of afflictions, he mentioned ignorance. Now, all of these afflictions are mental factors, right? So they're all phenomena. Now, refuting calling bad full knowing ignorance. So before I explain this, I just want to say this. I did this translation back at a time when I thought it was important to translate. It would be important, or that it would be more understandable to translate every word into English. And I was trying to think, well, what do I do about the Tibetan word shut up, the Sanskrit word prajna? A lot of people use prajna, a lot of people use wisdom, but wisdom is good for yeshe, or jnana in Sanskrit. So I wanted to use it for that. And then, well, but people don't understand, and I could use prajna, and that's kind of commonly used, but people don't understand what it means. It's better to make up my own term. So this is why it's never a good idea to be full of yourself when you do a translation, because then you come up with this really stupid word terms like this one that no one else ever is going to use. So when it talks about bad full knowing, what we mean here is bad prajna, defective prajna. Here in the translation of the Chim Abhidharma, Ian Coughlin calls it defective wisdom, defective prajna. So ignorance is, as it says in the verse, not bad full knowing, since that is view, or so not defective prajna, since that is view. Since it's concurrent with that view, it's taught that it afflicts full knowing, or afflicts prajna. So if that is so, it's like saying a bad child is not your child. You're disowning your child. Not my child anymore. Bad full knowing is ignorance, you say. So this is what they said. The opponent is saying it's kind of like calling, you have a child, the child is really terrible. You disown your child, it's not my child. It's the same thing. They're saying that the prajna is just bad, defective ignorance, and you're just saying the prajna is disowning it. It's ignorance. I'm not going to call it prajna. And so here it's not. You can't say that it's bad full knowing, as it says here, or bad prajna, defective prajna, since that is an afflicted view. So it is described in the 5th chapter that the views, the 5 wrong views, are prajna. They're defective prajna, but they're prajna. For example, you could think of this like the prajna that you need, the intelligence or the discernment that you need in order to build a weapon. Like the one someone else gave an example, and this is why I'm thinking of it, like the prajna that you need. I don't remember which master it was, but I did hear it from someone else, so this is not an original me, I can't take credit for it. The intelligence that you need in order to build an atomic bomb. You have to be incredibly intelligent. It's a really strong intelligence, and that's a kind of prajna, being able to discern causes and effects and see how things work. So it's prajna, but it's defective, because it's making a weapon of mass destruction. Right? So it can be strong and incisive and very, very intelligent in many ways, and yet be bad prajna. Defective prajna. Bad prajna. That sounds like something you'd say to a dog. You need prajna. Okay. So that is an afflicted view. So because it's disclassified as a view, we know that it is not ignorance. In that case, afflicted, that is defective prajna, is not a view, is ignorance, you say. That is not so, since ignorance, is concurrent with that view. So the opponent is saying, well, that may be so, but there is defective prajna that is not a view, they say. Well, what is it? That's a good question. But here the Vasubandhu's reply, it's not that. And the reason why it's not is because that prajna, for example, the prajna that is that allows one to build an atomic bomb is concurrent with ignorance. What is that ignorance? It is not knowing virtue from non-virtue. It is not knowing the nature of the three jewels. It is not understanding karmic cause and effect and all that. And the people who built the atomic bomb and the hydrogen bomb and all the weapons of mass destruction had that ignorance of not understanding the karmic effects of what they were doing, let alone thinking about the effects on the world. Well, maybe not. I don't know. I can't go too far on that one. Let's not talk about that. So it is not, since ignorance is concurrent with that view. So the defective views are concurrent with ignorance. And so the views are prajna. And so it is never, so view is a type of prajna. And if you say that the ignorance is a type of prajna, then you'd have two types of ignorance that are concurrent with each other. But that doesn't happen. As we spoke about in the last chapter last year, we talk about the concurrences of mind and mental factors. And one of the concurrences of mind and mental factors, there are 5 different types of concurrences, but one of them is called concurrence of substance, which means that for each consciousness, there is only one of each type of mental factor that appears. And not all mental factors, of course, appear with every cognition, but when you're talking about a mental factor such as ignorance, there's only one ignorance that is associated with, one mental factor of ignorance that is associated with a particular cognition. There's only one mental factor of prajna that is associated with each cognition. There aren't 2 mental factors of prajna, there's one. So this is kind of the basic idea. You've got the concurrence. Now, the prajna can take the prajna or the ignorance can each take different flavors, shall we say, to give a different feeling or a different quality to that. There can be levels in different types of prajna and different types of ignorance, but there is only really one type of ignorance and only one type of prajna associated with each cognition is the point. So that's what we're saying here. That is kind of review from last year. So the views are prajna, full knowing in this translation. It is never possible for 2 substances of prajna to be concurrent with each other. That is what I just explained. Additionally, defective prajna is not ignorance because it is taught that ignorance afflicts prajna, making it afflicted. So it is taught in other sutras that you can have afflicted prajna, and afflicted prajna is when you have ignorance at the same time as you have the prajna. So that is the explanation of ignorance. And so the main point is that it is not merely an absence of knowledge, it is not merely an absence of knowing, it's another separate. When we talk about it as a mental factor, it's a separate factor. When we talk about it as the link of interdependence, then it is the 5 aggregates when there are afflictions, including that mental factor of ignorance. So now we get to the explanation of names. So we know that, so after we have ignorance, we're skipping formation for right now, and then we're moving on to name. Now usually it's name and form, but we don't need to talk about form because we talked about form at length in the first chapter. So it's not necessary to say it here in the 3rd chapter. So here we're talking about name, and so this is why we are sort of 3.5 lengths instead of 4. Okay, so skandhas that are not form are name. The 4 skandhas, or aggregates, that are not form, feeling, and so forth, are name in the link name and form, because they engage their object by power of names, and because they are unobstructive like names. So when you have the name, it's like when you have, you can think of it like to put it kind of on a really simple level, you could say like the name aggregates are like thought. This is a little bit oversimplified, but I'm just going to simplify it for right now, because when you have thoughts, you have words going with it. And so basically, when we're talking about Consciousness actually, well, when we're talking about the feeling of the feelings, conceptions, and formations, and that are associated with each consciousness, it's like it's dealing with things, and they primarily focus on things in terms of name. Like conception is the predicating something. It's like predicating names, saying this is that. These flowers are blue and pink. That's predicating, right? And so that's giving a name, attributing a quality to it. So that's working with names, and so that's why these four aggregates are called the name aggregates. So they gauge their object by the power of names. In other words, when you're thinking about something, you're thinking about it in terms of names. And when you, and also these four aggregates are unobstructive, like names, right? Names are unobstructive. They're unobstructive because they're not form. And names are also not, well, this is an interesting, are names form or not? Not in the Great Exposition School, are they? Okay. Then at Great Exposition School, the names are non-concurrent formations, right? Sound is form, but names are non-concurrent formations for that. But we won't go there. That was last year. Okay. So now we've come to the top of page 242. The next one that we're going to speak about is contact. So we skipped formation and consciousness. We went to name and form and explained half of that because the other half had already been explained. And then we're skipping a couple more links and we're skipping one link. So we're skipping the six sense bases and going to contact. The six sense bases were talked about at length in the second chapter. Right? So the six contacts happen from assembly. 5 are obstructive contact, and the 6th is designated contact. Aware and unaware and other contact are stainless and afflicted, and the rest. Malicious, lustful contact, and the 3 felt as pleasant, and so forth. So here we're talking about a total of 16 different types of contact. You don't need to worry about the 16 yet. It comes at the last sentence, and this is kind of the pain, but we'll get to it. How we get to 16. Anyways, we have 6 contacts from I to mind that happen from assembly because they rise from the assembly of object, faculty, and consciousness coming together. So this is what is called frequently in the sutras. If you ever read the Prajnaparamita Sutras, you're going to come across this phrase over and over again. The contact of the assembly of eye, contact of the assembly of ear, contact of the assembly of nose, contact of the assembly of tongue, contact of the assembly of body, contact of the assembly of mind. So what is being assembled? We've got 3 things. We've got the external entity, the objective condition. We've got the internal faculty, which is the dominant condition, and then we have the consciousness. These 3 come together, and there is contact. This contact in the Great Exposition School is a mental factor, so it's another phenomena. It's not just like the point of contact between 3 physical things. It's like we've got, we've got the contact between the blue flower, the white flower, and the purple flower. They're all touching. It's not like that touching. It's like there's another phenomenon there. Right? So you've got that, and that is a mental factor of contact. Remember that when we have the mental factors, we have what is called the major ground of cognition, which includes mental factors such as contact, feeling, volition, prajna, mindfulness, and so forth. Right? So it is one of those mental factors. So this mental factor arises in that contact. So it is the mental factor that arises in the contact of the 3. So we've got so in this way you'd have like the I, a form, and an I consciousness coming together, making contact, right? And the same with the ear, sound, ear consciousness making contact. Okay? And here, it's in the sutras, it is very, very precise, and maybe two. So you might think, oh gosh, I got it already. Yeah, of course, nose and scent and nose consciousness. Yeah, okay, I get it. You might think of that, but actually it's really kind of good to go through the discipline of really breaking it down and looking at it. Because sometimes we take these things for granted. And especially when they're kind of simple to put together like this. You've got these three things. So we've got the nose, we've got the scent, and there's contact. There's mental factor there at the same time, okay? You've got the tongue and a flavor, or a taste, you can say either. And the tongue consciousness, there's contact. And then you have the body and the touch and the body consciousness, and there's contact. There's this mental factor that's happening in that assembly. Now, it's not like you've got three physical things that are coming into contact, because one of them is not physical. The faculty and the object are, for the five sensory faculties, which are, it is physical, right? This is why they are called obstructive contact. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Well then, the first five faculties in consciousness arise simultaneously, so they meet by assembly, right? So when you have the I, the form, and the consciousness, and the contact of the three, they're all happening at the same time. You've got the sense base of the I, that's the internal sense base. You have the external sense base of the form and the consciousness, and that makes the contact. The same with the ear. There, you've got two physical and then one consciousness coming together, and nose and so forth. So it's all more or less, they're all working the same way. But the mind is different. The reason the mind is different is those of you who took last year's course, do you remember what is the mind faculty? We went over this over and over again because it's really kind of confusing. The mind faculty. What is the mind faculty? It's the preceding moment of consciousness. The preceding moment of mind is the mind faculty. In other words, that it's essentially the same as when we talk about the conditions. It's the same as what we call the immediate condition. So that preceding moment of mind is the mental faculty, because there is no physical faculty the way there is with the five sensory faculties. So when we talk about the six internal sense bases, the mind faculty is the preceding moment of mind. Okay? This is just something you have to think about a little bit. So when we talk about the mind faculty, it's the preceding moment of mind. But that means we have a problem, because you have the object that is being thought about, you have the current I consciousness, and then you've got the previous mind consciousness. And how can they come into contact? Because that previous mind consciousness is already disappeared. It's already ceased by the time these two are present. So how can there be contact? This is the question. You got it? So you've got the object and even the object can be in the past. It even gets worse. You can think the object can be in the future because it's mind consciousness. You can think about all three times. And the consciousness is in the present, so you've got this object that is in a sort of time. You've got the mental, the mind faculty, which is definitely in the previous moment. So how is there contact? So here's what it's saying in this clause, in the second line of the paragraph. But in contact assembled by mind, it is not definite that all three will be assembled, because it is not logical that the mind faculty that has ceased, future dharmas that have not arisen, and the present mind consciousness could be assembled simultaneously. They just aren't there at the same time. So, that is what the opponent says. And the response is, this does not pervade, and so this means this is not necessarily so. Even though they may be, even though they may all be in different times, there is still contact, because the contact here can either be contact simultaneously, excuse me for a moment. The contact can either be simultaneously, or the contact can be the contact of cause and result. So that's what we're talking about, what it says here. This does not pervade because the assembly of cause and result is called an assembly, even though they are not necessarily simultaneously. So when we talk about the contact arising from the assembly of mind, then doesn't necessarily mean, or the contact that is the contact of the assembly of mind. The assembly of mind is cause and result. It's not necessarily at the same time, whereas the other five are, because the five sensory consciousnesses necessarily have a present object. Alternatively, another explanation for this, the single result itself has the meaning of assembly because the result is compatible with the production of a single contact. So in other words, there's the result. It's not talking about the assembly of cause and result, but there's that resulting contact that we can say is the assembly. There are many divergent opinions of earlier masters about contact appear. The many different divergent opinions of earlier masters about contact appear in the Great Tika, so refer there. Now, the Great Tika refers to Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje's extended commentary on the Abhidharma. So this is not yet translated into English, but there are plans for someone else to translate it. The people in Sekha Retreat Center are planning to translate it. So that is there. But it is also, many of these opinions are also described in Chim Jambyang's commentary, The Ornament of Abhidharma. They're also in the translations of some of them are in the auto commentary as well. So you don't necessarily have to look at the Karmapa's commentary if you want to look before that commentary is translated. So now, of these different types of contact, when we look at the contacts, there's different ways of looking at contact. Of these contacts, the first five are obstructive contact because they are contact that arises based on obstructive faculties that have form. So, right, you've got the eye is obstructive, form that you see is obstructive, and so obstructive contact. And the sixth is called designated contact because one meaning may be labeled with many names, so names are designations. And this is the contact that focuses on those. So here, when we're talking about contact with the mind, with the mental faculty, then generally it's saying, like, giving a word. It's involving words. So it's called designated or designation contact. I think I said designated because it just sounded better, but really it's not that the contact itself is designated, it's that it's designating or that it's using words. Okay. For example, the eye consciousness knows blue but does not know to think this is blue, whereas the mind consciousness does know to think this is blue. It knows what the name of a given meaning or given entity is. Should say entity, not meaning. So here what we're saying is like when the eye knows blue, and this is bringing up an example brought up in the sutras that comes up in this treatise. It also comes up in other treatises. I was just seeing it in Dignaga's treatise, Compendium of Validity, the other day. So this is a very frequent thing. When you're saying, when you have the eye and you look, and when you're looking with the eye at something blue, can you see a blue flower? There are blue flowers. You look at the blue, or you can look at purple. When we look at it for us, there's almost always the name associated with it. But at the same time, as explained by Jinendra Buddhi, who was an Indian scholar, 6th or 7th century, when you relax the mind and you come to a point when you're in shamatha and you don't have any movement of thought, and you just look and you merely see a blue entity, you see the blue, you know the blue, and yet you do not have the thought, blue. There's no scare quotes, blue. You're just seeing blue without any scare quotes, right? When you have the mind consciousness, it's different. The mind consciousness is thinking blue with the quotes, right? We can do this in English, right? Blue. I don't know if you can't do this in Tibetan. In Tibetan, you don't go If you did this, they're going to wonder, what are you doing? They don't have inverted commas or quotation marks. Of course, some of them like it and are trying to start using it. So, anyways. So it's like this question that, so when you have the thought working, then thought and mind consciousness confutes the name and the entity. Okay, so that's kind of a characteristic of thought. It confutes names and entities. And that's basically, now there is perception in the mental consciousness, but generally what we're aware of in the mental consciousness is the thought, the conceptual, the conflation of words and entities. Also, these six can become three. So we have six types of contact. We have the conduct of the assembly of eye, contact of the assembly of ear, and so forth up to mind. That's six, right? But they can also be talked about in terms of three different types of contact. Aware contact, and unaware or ignorant contact, and the other contact that is neither of those two, the contact that is neither aware nor unaware. And actually it says this in the Sanskrit. Naividya, well, I don't remember what it is. Anyways, it's long. Aware contact, not aware, and not unaware contact. So we've got these three types. So the first two are respectively stainless, undefiled contact. That means the contact, this is the path of seeing, the wisdom or the cognitions on the path of seeing that are seeing the natures of the Four Noble Truths. They are undefiled or stainless cognitions. So when they have contact with that, they are aware. They know. Okay? Then we have the unaware contact. And then we have afflicted. The first two respective afflicted contact, this is the ignorant contact, the unaware or ignorant contact that is afflicted, because ignorance is an affliction. Because the aware mentioned here is undefiled full knowing, and ignorance in this context is afflicted full knowing. So above we were talking about ignorance as a separate phenomenon. Here we're talking about it as afflicted full knowing, but actually the ignorance is a separate mental factor that afflicts the full knowing. And these contacts are concurrent with those. So when you have the aware contact, you have undefiled prajna. When you have unaware contact, you have the defective prajna that is concurrent with the ignorance. So therefore, it is afflicted prajna or ignorant prajna. And so that prajna is that contact is the unaware. And then the third is the rest, other than those two. And so that would mean contact concurrent with virtuous defiled or unobscured neutral full knowing. So when you have, the virtuous contact, when you have virtuous conduct, there is, when you have defiled virtues, such as virtues performed other than the path of seeing. For example, when you have, before you achieve the path, before you have the path, before you have, virtues other than the truth of the path. So, for example, defiled generosity that is not in the noble path, and so forth. Or when you have unobscured neutral actions, such as, I don't know, what would not obscure? I'm blanking on what they might be, but that's basically, unobscured neutral would mean a type of action that doesn't obscure or prevent you from achieving liberation. Brushing your teeth, maybe. Within ignorant contact, there's malicious and lustful contact, which are labeled by the names of their companions, are especially harmful, so they're taught separately. So there's the contact that leads to like a feeling of malice, malicious contact, and then there's the lustful contact would promote lust, and so those are given separately. So those are counted as two separate types of contact as well. Now, alternatively, so we're talking about all these different contacts. All contact can be included within three categories of contact: felt or experienced as pleasant, and so forth, including the contact experienced as pleasant and contact experienced as neutral, because they are the compatible causes, the experiences of pleasure, and so forth. So here, this is, so when you have contact, for example, let's take it with a physical sensation, because it's kind of easier, I think, to feel like that. You have the contact with rabbit fur, nice soft bunny fur. We're assuming that there is the bunny fur, there is your hand, and there is the body consciousness. You touch the bunny, you stroke the nice soft fur, and this is going to produce a pleasant feeling for most humans, right? That would be the contact that could be categorized as pleasant, the three felt as pleasant. It's experienced as pleasant. Then you can have the contact that would be experienced as unpleasant. So this would be like a bed of nails. Some people might find that pleasant, but we're going to take it as an unpleasant example. So you touch the bed of nails, and there is the contact of your skin and the bed of nails, and this produces an unpleasant or painful feeling. And so this would be contact that would be felt as unpleasant. Contact that would be felt as neutral would be contact that happens, but you're not particularly aware of it. For example, when you are sitting in a room where the temperature is just at a nice, perfect temperature, so you can't really feel the air as being either cold or hot, just perfect temperature. That would be the neutral contact. Maybe that's a contact leading to pleasure. Maybe it's a bad example. At any rate, it's something that you don't feel is either pleasant or unpleasant. So those are the three types of contact. Okay? So in this way we have 16 types of contact. So this is the hard one. This is the hard part about this. Actually, the hard part is really understanding these and thinking about these. But if we think about what are the 16 types of contact, and what makes this difficult is that there are different ways that these are identified in different commentaries. So different when you sit down, if you don't look at another commentary that explains it, you try to think, what are these 16 different types of contacts? You might go crazy. Or you might pull your hair out. So 6 contacts happen from assembly. So that's 1 through 6. That's easy, right? 1 through 6. Okay? Then we've got 5 are obstructive contact, and the 6th is designated contact. So of those 6, we can count 5 of them separately as obstructive contact. That's number 7. And we've got the designated contact, which is the mind contact. That's 8. Okay? 8. Then we've got aware, unaware, and other contact. Now, these 3 types of contact, these would be 9, 10, and 11 respectively. These 3 types of contact are again not separate than the 6 contacts we had in the beginning. So when we're saying this is what you have, the trick that you have to remember. When we're talking about 16 types of contact, we're not meaning 16 separate types of contact. We're talking about 16 different categories that we could use. So 9, 10, and 11 are aware, unaware, and other contact. Then we've got malicious and lustful contact. Okay, that's not really any different than the unaware contact, and that itself is no different than the other 6. Still, they're counted separately. And then we've got the 3 felt as pleasant and so forth. So that's the 16. So we've got 6 contacts, that's 1 to 6. 7 is the obstructive, 8 is designated, aware, unaware, and other are 9, 10, and 11 respectively. Malicious is 12, lustful is 13, the pleasant is 14, unpleasant is 15, and the neutral is 16. So that's 16 categories there. Now, we have now come to the specific explanation of feeling. So this is the 4th of the ones that we're talking about. And there's a fair amount on this. I think what I'll do is I'll just begin it today. So the explanation of feeling has 2 topics, the general classification and a specific explanation of mental feeling. We'll just go through the general classification today. The general classification is, from that, 6 feelings can arise, 5 bodily, the other mental. From that, meaning contact, 6 feelings can arise. 5 bodily and the other mental. So 5 bodily, obviously the ones that come from ear, the contact assembled by, or the contact of the assembly of eye, the contact of the assembly of ear, and so forth to contact of assembly of body. And the mental is the one that comes from the contact of assembly of mind, right? And in the sutras, we see these phrases over and over again. So when you read the sutras on transcendent prajna, then you're going to see this over and over again. You're going to see the feeling that arises from the contact of the assembly of eye, the feeling that arises from the contact of the assembly of ear, the feeling that arises from the contact of the assembly of nose, the feeling that arises from the contact of assembly of tongue, the feeling that arises from the contact of assembly of body, the feeling that arises from the contact of the assembly of mind. So what happens is you have the contact. You have the three coming together, and that contact is a mental factor. And then that mental factor, well, here's the tricky part. It's either concurrent with or it produces a feeling. And that feeling is going to either be generally pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Or mentally pleasant or displeasant. Unhappiness at inner. We'll get a little bit more into that tomorrow. From that contact, there are 6 feelings that can arise. Feeling arises from contact assembled by eye, and so on. And here in this translation, beforehand, when I did it, feeling that arises from contact assembled by eye, and so on. It should actually contact of the assembly of eye, and so on. It's not like the eye puts it together. I misread the grammar, the Tibetan grammar, and I just checked it again today. So it actually should be the contact of the assembly of eye. Of these, because the first 5 depend upon faculty with form, they are bodily feeling. So contact, or the feeling that arises from the contact of assembly of body, or of eye, feeling that arises from the contact of assembly of ear, feeling that arises from the contact of assembly of nose, feeling that arises from the contact of the assembly of tongue, feeling that arises from the contact of assembly of body, are all physical. So they're bodily or physical. The mental feeling is other than those 5. It is feeling that arises from the contact assembled by mind. So that would be either mental pleasure, unhappiness, or neutral. Now here's a question. Does the feeling arise after contact or together with it? Some great expositionists say they are together because they are mutual co-emergent causes. So co-emergent causes are causes and results that kind of work together to help each other come out. And so in the Great Exposition they say that the mind and mental factors are mutual causes and results. They're co-emergent causes because they help each other. It's like the mind, the consciousness, and then all of the contact, feeling, volition, and so forth, and intentions and so forth that are concurrent or associated with it, all work together to make a thing. And so they're called co-emergent causes. And so these great exposition masters are saying that the contact and the feeling are in this way co-emergent causes. They work together. Okay? The Sutra school asks, if they arise simultaneously, then how can the producer be proven to produce the thing that's produced? If they happen at the same time, right? If something happens before something else, and if it isn't there, then that other thing can't arise, then you can say that earlier thing produces the later thing. But if they're at the same time, how can this produce, we've got the pencil and the glasses case. The pencil does not create the glasses case because the pencil and the glasses cases exist at the same time. If there first was a pencil and then a glasses case, then you could say that the pencil was like a cause that created it. But they're at the same time. So when this is doing the creating, this already exists. How can it be its cause? Is what the Sutra school is essentially saying. In response, the great exposition asks in return, why wouldn't it be proven? We say it in our treatise. And the sutra says, the sutra school says, we don't take except your treatises, we follow the sutras. It replies that two co-emergent dharmas cannot be proven to be produced or unproduced because after a dharma has arisen, there is no power to produce it again. So when you have the pencil and the glasses case, remember that these are momentary phenomena that are each arising and perishing in every moment. We look at it and we think as one thing that's, or two things that are arising at this, and we could say, oh, well, the glasses case was made earlier than the pencil. Actually, I've had this pencil for many years. That could well be the other way around. But actually, in each moment, they're each kind of the next moment of each one. So in each moment of these two, they're co-emergent, in other words, they're rising at the same time. But you can't, but when this is arising, when this has arisen and could possibly do work, then this also has arisen, and therefore it couldn't do anything to benefit the arising of the glasses case. That's basically what we're saying. Does that make sense? Basically, if something's going to be a cause and result, the Sutra school is saying that the cause has to precede the result. Otherwise, how could you? Otherwise, the result already exists when the cause is there, and what need would you have for the cause? There are many other such debates between the exposition and sutra schools, which can be found in the Great Tika itself, as well as in the Chimjambyang's ornament of Abhidharma, and in the auto commentary on the Abhidharma. Okay, so I think that is enough for today. Osanam de tam che se pani tobne nye pedranam pam chene gyegana chimbar la trobai sibe tole drowa drowar shom. Thank you.